You know that feeling when you post something simple like, hey, maybe let's protect kids, and suddenly your DMs are full of strangers telling you to leave your own city? Yeah, that's America right now. Freedom of speech is fine until you actually use it. I'm Sam Richardson, and this is Living Richardson, the podcast where real life meets real talk. Sometimes a little messy, always a little loud. Today we're diving into what it feels like when your voice gets treated like a problem. Not the legal definition of free speech, this isn't civics class, but the lived one. The kind where supporting your school district's decision on coach-led prayer somehow lands you in the comment section crosshairs. The kind where saying the quiet part out loud turns neighbors into enemies. The kind where I was literally gagged by a judge and held in contempt of court for saying my neighbor's name to them in my own backyard. And yes, that is exactly how I got the internet nickname, Queen of the Glory Holes. Don't worry, we'll get to that. I've learned the hard way that silencing isn't about volume. It's about control. I've been watched, sued, gagged, made into a punchline, all because I refuse to stay quiet. And still I keep showing up. Because shrinking never kept me safe. Telling the truth did. So, grab a coffee or whatever keeps you steady, and let's get into it. The headlines, the prayer debate, the camera saga, and what it really means to keep your voice when fear tells you to shut up. Some weeks, the news doesn't just scroll by. It knocks the wind out of you. Over this summer, Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband were murdered while they slept in their own beds. Home is the one place that should feel untouchable, but it wasn't safe for them. And it wasn't random. It was because of who she was, what she represented, and the voice she carried in politics. And then, of course, just last week, I even hesitate to say the name because of everything that is going on right now. But Charlie Kirk, a man whose voice had filled conservative stages and airways, was assassinated in broad daylight in front of thousands of people. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, the reality is chilling. People in this country are being killed for their words, for their positions, for daring to stand where someone else decided they shouldn't. As a mom, it's hard to shake the weight of that. If lawmakers in positions of power aren't safe in their own beds, if public figures can be shot down at public speaking events, and now just this morning, the news of everything happening with shutting down Jimmy Kimmel, what kind of world are we leaving for our children? A world where speaking up could cost you everything? For me, it's not just a theory. I know what it feels like to be punished for speaking. I've been gagged by a court order, sued for telling the truth, held in contempt for saying someone's name in my own backyard. So when I read these stories, they don't feel distant. They land right in my chest. They press on old scars and make me ask the question so many of us wonder. How are we supposed to keep parenting when the world is on fire? Like clockwork, the very next day following the murder of Charlie Kirk, an email from my kid's school district landed in my inbox. The superintendent explained that the district had received a letter from the Freedom from Religion Foundation about coach-led prayer. After reviewing the issue with the district's legal team, they determined what the law already makes clear. Coach-led prayer isn't allowed. Nothing new has been added, nothing had been taken away. The district was simply upholding the law and protecting every student, not just the majority. And for a moment, I had a sigh of relief. Relief that my kid's district still takes the law seriously. Relief that inclusion matters here. But that calm didn't last long. Almost immediately, the backlash started. An online petition circulated, comment threads exploded, and a candidate for trustee announced on social media that he was going to show up to the board meeting to oppose their decision. As a mom of 3 kids in this district, and as a volunteer cheer coach, I knew I needed to be there too. Not to fight, but to stand in support for the district, and support for the family who first felt uncomfortable enough to raise the concern. At the board meeting, I listened as the superintendent carefully explained everything. The email, the legal review, the conversations with community clergymen, the reasoning behind the decision. I watched the school board back him up with calm clarity. And I applauded when an 11th grader stood up to share her own story, courage spilling out of her like a lesson for all of us. Later, I shared my support on my own social media, support for the district and for that student. And almost immediately, the comments rolled in. I'm going to read my two favorites. It's people like you that empower these organizations to bully our schools into not teaching what this country stands for. You must be new to the area. This is a Christian community. Always has been, always will be. People can't handle it, move to the city. They will welcome you with open arms. And sounds more like shitty parenting. Your kid don't know God, isn't comfortable around religion. What are you teaching? Now, those words don't wound me. They don't shake me. They only confirmed why this issue matters, because those comments are the proof. And that took me back to my own childhood. Growing up Catholic in a tiny, poor Catholic school where religion wasn't a side note. It was the rhythm of life. We had religion class every weekday. Mass on Fridays with my class, Mass again on Sundays with my family. Starting in 6th grade, I actually was the cantor for our Mass, and I led my parish in praising the Lord. I didn't just study the Bible, I lived inside of it. But in high school, when I transferred to a public school because my mom could no longer afford Catholic school, I was suddenly outcast by kids who thought they were the real Christians. To them, I wasn't Christian enough. I know what it feels like to stand in the middle of your own community and be told you don't belong. So no, I don't need to study the Bible to be a good person. My kids don't need mandatory Bible study to be good kids. And I'm not a shitty mom for not teaching them doctrine. Because what I am teaching them is empathy, respect, compassion, and how not to weaponize belief against your neighbor. For all of the negative comments, there were positive ones too. Parents thanking me for speaking, students saying they felt seen, community members reminding me and reminding each other that we are not alone. And sometimes in weeks like these, that reminder is everything. Okay, by now you have probably heard me mention my internet nickname, Queen of the Glory Holes. It sounds like a punchline, but the truth behind it is anything but funny. In 2015, I was a stay-at-home mom who felt alone. So I started a blog called Living Richardson because I needed somewhere to be honest about trauma, about motherhood, about trying to hold it together when most days felt like quicksand. I was a woman who had lost and buried her firstborn child and now was trying to navigate being a mother while carrying that trauma. In 2020, I took that blog to TikTok, and during COVID, when everyone felt disconnected, I built a following by telling the truth. Messy, authentic, sometimes raw, sometimes funny. People craved honesty, and I'm willing to give it. By 2021, my husband and I, along with our 3 children, moved into what we thought would be our dream home, in a community where our kids could grow. But instead of safety, it became a nightmare. The whole saga actually started with our neighbor attempting a land grab. My husband addressed it, and after a land survey confirmed the property was ours, the neighbors informed us they were going to tie a new pipe into the private water basin on our property to direct the flow of water out of their own backyard. My husband, who is a structural engineer, informed them that it was our private water basin, they did not have public access to it, and unfortunately, They couldn't tie a new pipe in because the basin wouldn't be able to handle the additional water flow. Months later, during one of the biggest snowstorms we'd ever had, the neighbor called and accused us of altering that water basin and said it was flooding their basement. But I had been close with the wife. I was a stay-at-home mom. She was a teacher. We spent all summer together. I had been in their home. I had seen the water-stained basement walls that had been there before we ever moved in. Their lot had sat vacant for decades for a reason. It was swampy land that should never have been built on, and other neighbors in our development confirmed that. The day after my husband told them over the phone that they did not have permission to access our basin, I was home alone with our 3-year-old. I looked out the back window and saw several men, including our neighbor, standing on our property, preparing to run a camera through our drain. These men were from the city. Our neighbor wanted them to camera the drain to check for any kind of cracks or damage being done. So I went outside in my pajamas and slippers, my mom bun, told them that they did not have permission on my property. The city worker stopped, and my neighbor looked at me and said, "This is the city." I said, "I don't care who they are. They don't have permission to be on my private property." He seriously just stood there. "This is the city," he said again. So I went and got the physical copy of our property survey and showed the city workers. The city workers then explained plainly to our neighbor that an easement doesn't work the way he thought they did. That unless there was a problem with the direct city's line, they had no reason to be on my property. And there wasn't a problem, so they left. The city later confirmed that we had done nothing wrong. But the harassment escalated. The neighbors then installed a fence and mounted a Ring camera on it, aiming it into our backyard, capturing our swimming pool, all 3 of our bathrooms, and my son's bedroom. We tried to block it with a wooden lattice. They moved it. So we moved the lattice to block it again. They moved it again. So we went to the sheriff's department to just ask legally, was this allowed? They told us it was a gray area because the camera was on his property and he could claim it was surveillance. They offered to intervene, and even though we feared escalation, they addressed our concerns with the neighbors. The very next day, the camera was moved past the barrier for the 3rd time. That's when I turned to my platform on social media. I filmed a video in my robe, asking for advice, explaining how my neighbor had set up that camera, how we had tried to block it, how law enforcement said they couldn't help. That video, like several of my other videos, went viral. However, this story was picked up by online media outlets, so it received a lot of attention. Just days later, I received a demand letter. My neighbor claimed my video cost them to lose $1.6 million in an ATM business deal, a business they had just started out of their garage and a hauling trailer. Over 2 years of litigation, they never produced any evidence. None. No proof of damage, no proof of this deal. Nothing. Still, they sued. And while we fought it, the harassment grew. Fake TikTok accounts popped up using versions of our address and phone number. We were doxxed. My neighbor himself sent the demand letter to media outlets with both of our addresses printed on it. I kept speaking on my platform because I was terrified. I didn't know what he was capable of. Speaking was the only way I felt I could keep my family safe. So, the neighbors petitioned the court for a gag order. The judge agreed in part. I was barred from publicly saying their names or showing their faces while the case was ongoing, which is something I never did. I never said their names or show their faces, But still, I was legally gagged. And that's when Bertha Basin was born. I needed a way to cope, to reclaim my power. If they wanted to point cameras at me, I was going to give them a show. I started making videos with the water basin itself. I named her Bertha because I am a weirdo who gets attached to inanimate objects. I recreated movie scenes. I tap danced on her concrete edge. It was absurd. It was silly, but it was also survival. Humor became my resistance. And people loved Bertha. Videos about her went viral, and suddenly I was known as the Basin Lady. But in court, the plaintiffs completely misunderstood how social media worked. They argued that I was profiting from hashtags, that somehow I was making money directly off each hashtag. Anyone who actually understands online platforms knows that's not how monetization works. But they didn't. My attorneys advised me to be careful, to even consider shifting hashtags. So I asked my audience, what should we call ourselves? And one follower commented that we should be the glory holes, because Bertha is such a glorious hole. Again, I'm a weirdo, and I ran with it and was like, hey, glory holes are known to take a beating, but to keep standing. So that's like definitely what we are. And from that moment, my community became known as the glory holes, and they dubbed me as their queen. What started as mockery turned into resilience. But then came one of the days that pushed it even more. I was playing in the backyard with my 12-year-old daughter and our puppy when I noticed our male neighbor filming us from his sliding glass door. He was standing there like he had done multiple times, filming us in the privacy of our own yard. He had his phone pointed directly at me and my child. I felt that same fear in my chest that I have felt my entire life when danger creeps too close. But this time I had my own phone, so I filmed him back. Yes, I raised my voice. Yes, I yelled. Yes, I said his name and his wife's name directly to him, because he was right there, filming us in our own backyard. So I called the police, and 2 deputies came. For the first time in the entire ordeal, I actually felt validated. They watched my footage. They said, yes, this is harassment. Yes, this is creepy. They even called their sergeant, trying to find a way to act. But legally, because the neighbor stayed on his property, there wasn't a criminal charge they could file. My neighbor actually refused to answer his door when they tried to collect his statement. The next day, my neighbors filed to hold me in contempt of court because I said their name in my own backyard, which they claimed would be public. Months later, I sat in a courtroom as their attorney played an edited video of that day, one that started about halfway through my yelling. My own footage was never played because I should have had the privacy in my own backyard to say whatever I pleased. And the fact that this man was filming me while I spoke to him should have protected my First Amendment right. But the judge believed that I had purposefully violated her specific order, so she fined me $250 for each time I said their names on their video. Their video captured me saying their names 4 times, so I was fined $1,000. Here's some bitter irony. In my unedited video, I believe I say their name 7 times. It's interesting to look back on it now because I could have been fined more for saying their name, but then my video also proved that they lied on their video. So I was held in contempt of court for saying someone's name to them in my own backyard, while that person filmed me and my daughter playing. Silencing isn't just about questioning your words. It's about controlling your power. and making you so afraid to speak up that you stop altogether. But I didn't stop because silence has never protected me. When I think about it all together, the national headlines, the uproar over prayer in my kid's school district, and me being fined for saying someone's name in my own backyard, it paints the same picture. Free speech is fragile. It's not just a right written on paper. It's lived and tested every day in boardrooms, in classrooms, in courtrooms, and in your own backyard. What I've learned is that silencing doesn't always come with handcuffs. Sometimes it comes with comments telling you to leave town. Sometimes it comes in the form of lawsuits meant to exhaust you. Sometimes it comes in a fine for speaking words you were never supposed to stop saying. But silence has never protected me. Not as a child outcast in my own school, not as a mom raising kids in a community where belief gets weaponized, not as a woman in court. So I keep speaking, because even if my voice shakes, even if the backlash comes, even if they mock me into a nickname, speaking is the only way forward. And for all the noise, there are always people who remind you you are not alone. And that matters more than anything. Because whether it's national tragedies, local controversies, or personal battles, the fight is the same. Do we only protect speech when it's comfortable, or do we protect it when it's hard? If you've made it this far into today's episode, thank you. Truly, these stories aren't easy to tell, and I know they're not always easy to hear. But they matter. When the headlines feel heavy, when the school board meetings get loud, when even your own backyard stops feeling safe, it can be easy to think the world is too far gone. But then I look around at the people who do show up, the people who comment with support, the people who remind all of us that we are not alone. And I remember that community is what keeps us standing. And that is why I created the Silent Mother Project, to hold space for grief, trauma, healing, and also for joy. Because we need both. And that's why I am inviting you to our karaoke and dance fundraiser happening on Saturday, September 27th at Sense by the Falls in Cuyahoga Falls. It starts at 7 p.m. It's a free event, open to anyone of any age. Come sing, dance, laugh, and heal with us. Whether it's in a classroom, a courtroom, or a karaoke mic, let's keep showing up for each other. Let's keep speaking out, because fear only wins if we stay quiet. Thank you for listening, thank you for supporting, and thank you for reminding me and reminding each other that we are not alone. Catch you next time.